Number 10. Neptune's rings. Okay, for the first time in 33 years, thanks to the James Webb Space Telescope over at NASA, we got a fresh look at Neptune. Now, this new look reveals stunning details of the ice giant's atmosphere, its moons, and its rings. Yeah, its rings. This blew my mind. I couldn't believe that it was Neptune when I first saw this on Reddit. What a glow up. She looks great, honestly. The last time we got a glimpse of her was the summer of 1989, when NASA's Voyager 2 became the first ever spacecraft to observe the planet. I'm excited for the James Webb Space Telescope, what it brings in the future. I don't know if I'm ready though, but this is exactly what I wanted. Just cool photos of planets, that's it. Also show us a black hole maybe, that wouldn't hurt. Number 9, asteroid redirection. Okay, this next one has Michael Bay written all over it. I'm pretty excited for this project. I can't even catch a baseball with my hands, and you're telling me NASA's gonna catch an asteroid. Awesome, let's talk about it. NASA landing on an asteroid, that's one thing, that's a feat in itself, but their asteroid redirection mission is just next level. This coming Monday, like very soon, NASA will broadcast its first attempt to modify the orbit of an asteroid. And yeah, before you start to panic, there's no way any debris can hit Earth afterwards in case anything goes awry, or awry, as I said for way too long. But if an asteroid was coming for Earth, well, now we have a backup plan to save the planet and the human race. That's always great. The planetary defense team is using a craft called DART, Double Asteroid Redirection Test, which will ideally target the asteroid Dimorphos, altering its orbit. That's cool. Hope it works, or else it won't work. Number 8, Pluto Space Slug. Back in January 2016, the New Horizons probe was sending tons of information back on our little ex-planet, Pluto. We remember him. God rest his soul. The icy plain shows a series of lines, almost like these giant space slugs are slowly moving across the surface, right? It reminds me of that episode of SpongeBob where the gang is riding a rock for a while. Maybe Patrick and SpongeBob are just delivering a cosmic pizza, who knows. This icy area of the dwarf planet is called Sputnik Planum, and scientists believe so far it's the planet cooling and heating, then cooling and heating, therefore leaving lines, looking like something's slugging its way across the planet. Just heat and cooling, cooling and heating, heating and cooling, space stuff, you know. Number 7, dead galaxies. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old. New research from NASA using the Hubble Space Telescope found 6 different dead galaxies. Dead galaxies, no fun at all. Imagine if the Guardians of the Galaxy went here. No 50s music, just Imagine Dragons, that's it. Just Imagine Dragons, U2, and Nickelback. That's all it's playing in this galaxy. Horrible, it's a nightmare. These dead galaxies had run out of cold hydrogen needed to make the stars, and without the fuel for new stars, these galaxies were basically running on nothing. Like when your car battery dies, only, you know, this is a cosmic scale. This discovery led us to a new question that we didn't even know that we had. What led these galaxies to die? How did they get to this point? What happened to all of the cold gas so early on? These 6 galaxies lived fast, hot lives, but we aren't sure what went wrong quite yet. And yeah, it'd probably help to know. Give us a few tips, that's for sure. Lead author and assistant professor of astronomy at the University of Massachusetts, Kate Whitaker, proposed several potential explanations and gave us insight asking all the right questions. Like, for example, did a supermassive black hole in the galaxy's center suddenly turn on and then heat up all the gas? If so, if that was the case, the gas could still be there, but now it's just cold. You need Thanos or something to come in to fire it up again. Otherwise, it's gonna stay still and quite dead. Dead galaxies. Imagine if a galaxy came back to life. That's way worse than a zombie. Number 6, crescent Earth. There's something you don't hear often, and of course you won't see this too often either. A crescent Earth. What we're actually seeing here is the Earth as it rises and looms over the Apollo 14 lander. That crescent there is Earth. We look like that from the moon, which is, it makes complete sense. It's just something I never really thought about until now. You see it and you're like, oh yeah, it would look like that, I guess. It would be the opposite. If you were to camp out on the far side of the moon, because the moon and the Earth are, you know, tidally locked, you wouldn't be able to see the Earth at all in your lifetime. But on the near side of the moon, you'd see the Earth all the time, and through the course of about a month, the Earth would also go through phases, just like the moon, but they'd be direct opposite phases. People on Earth would be witnessing the moon going through, you know, likewise, and I've confused myself talking about this, but you understand what I'm trying to say. I can't believe I've never seen this photo before. It's truly stunning. Number 5, smooth moon. While we're on the topic of moons, let's do it. When we think of moons, we think of our own, right? Just a big ball of cheese in the sky. It's got craters, it's got lots of craters, and maybe a big old man's face that often pops up. We get it. Well, moons are quite unique. Some look a little different. Some look quite haunting, actually. Some look like chewed gum and some look like spaceships. NASA's Cassini spacecraft caught this image back in 2017. It looks almost like two moons crashed into one another. It has a ring-like edge. So it looks kind of man-made, dare I say. So a new photo has come back after discovering this moon back in 1980. Scientists were surprised that this moon is actually really smooth. There's just 0 craters. It's a smooth moon. One of the smoothest out there. Smoother than your moon. Number 4, Jupiter's clouds. We've all seen and heard of Jupiter's big red spot, and that's just a, haunting nightmare in itself. I don't want to think about that too much. But when NASA's Juno spacecraft passed the Goliath back in 2017, we captured something just as interesting, if not more terrifying than the big red spot. Jupiter's clouds. Yeah, apparently it's got clouds. It feels like you can almost put your arm out and just touch it. It's like a silky space sky, but that's about 20,000 kilometers away. You can't touch that. There's no way in hell. That's a big ball of hydrogen, and it's quite mysterious below those clouds still. So far, NASA has found lightning higher up that they never thought they could ever go. They found constant storms at both poles, and winds so powerful and its magnetic fields are actually moved around. Winds so strong that it moves the magnetic, I can't even comprehend that. Beautiful, mysterious, and deadly. We love space, and we love Jupiter. Number 3, Mimas moon. Saturn is known for having a plethora of moons. Saturn has 82 moons. If you were a werewolf and you lived on Saturn, you would be so stressed out all the time, constantly. One of those moons is Mimas, and it's a moon that looks oddly familiar. Yeah, if you're a sci-fi geek, this one's gonna give you some anxiety. Is that the Death Star? Is this thing pointing at Earth? Are we doomed? We're doomed. Saturn's smallest innermost moon caused quite the stir here on Earth when it was first discovered. About a year ago, researchers discovered that the moon has a bit of a wobble to it. Almost like a floating magic 8-ball, something that's sloshing around inside, like a water balloon in space. That's kind of gross. Mimas could potentially be housing a liquid ocean inside. And if that's the case, everything we know about water and ocean life in space would need to be rewritten. Rewritten, I said. We have to rewrite it, please. Everything we know about life in space would have to be rethought and rewritten. It would just be a whole plethora. We're like, that would be cool, but please don't be the case, or else we gotta do a lot of homework. Number 2, space selfie. The word selfie hasn't been around for too long, but people have been taking them for years on our planet and not, apparently. With adjustable views and forward-facing cameras, they've definitely become easier to take over the years, for sure. I've taken a few this morning and in my lifetime. But that didn't stop Apollo 17's Ron Evans from having his own hand at the selfies. Of course, he has to one-up us. A guy goes into space and he's like, beat that, 46 million likes. The photo shows about half of Ron, although it's tough to tell with him, decked out in his space Iron Man suit. And apparently he snapped this photo while he was retrieving exposed film from outside of the spacecraft. This is perhaps the most badass selfie of all time. On the clock too, what a king, getting it done. On the way back to Earth, near the end of the mission, Evans did a 1 hour and 6 minute long spacewalk, so it's entirely possible that's when this photo was taken. I mean, technically we were all in the background for this one, so we were there. Well, not us, but your parents. Number 1, Mars eclipse. So this last one here is more of a video rather than a single image, because you know what, I was feeling nice. I wanted to bring you a series of 89 different images, all captured by NASA's Curiosity rover, and then just whip them in your eyes really fast. Make a little movie for you. NASA's Curiosity rover showed us insights as to what life is like on Mars and what it looks like. So on Earth, we have these cosmic coincidences, the distant ratio between Earth and the moon versus the Earth and the sun. It's rare, but when the moon passes in front of the sun, we get a total eclipse. It covers it completely. On other planets, however, namely Mars, that's not exactly the case. The angles aren't as perfect. So, what happens when one of the moon passes in front of the sun? Well, it's much smaller, and it appears like this. Curiosity was able to observe a ton of these instances, which are called transits. They're not eclipses, they're transits from Mars and its 2 moons. And these are from Mars and its 2 moons, from Phobos and Deimos. Yeah, imagine having 2 moons. That would get confusing. Beautiful, but everyone into astrology would be like, I think it's my month. I don't really know. This other moon here is confusing me. Sound off below what the craziest thing is you've ever got a photo of. I don't know, maybe in space, maybe not. Maybe on Earth too. A lot of weird shit happens down here.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have PSR B0943+10. Pulsars are rotating neutron stars emitting regular pulses of radiation, and they have long captivated astronomers with their very precise cosmic metronomes. But in 2011, a particularly eccentric pulsar, the one I just named, challenged established understanding and left scientists scratching their heads. Located approximately 3,000 light-years away, this is no ordinary pulsar. Instead of maintaining a steady, predictable pattern of radiation, it displays a very perplexing behavior. Without warning, it spontaneously switches between emitting radio waves and X-ray emissions. This erratic mood swing bewilders scientists. Standard models of pulsar behavior were based on the idea that radio wave and X-ray emissions were tied to different periods in a pulsar's life, not that a pulsar could switch between them at will. PSR B0943+10's unpredictable switches happening over mere seconds shatters this belief. Despite being discovered in the 60s, it wasn't until 2011 that this pulsar's unusual trait was detected, demonstrating that even familiar celestial bodies can surprise us. This pulsar's peculiar behavior provides a very unique window into neutron star physics, challenging our knowledge and understanding of these celestial lighthouses. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Galactic Center radio signal. In 2013, astronomers turned their attention closer to home, or more accurately our galactic home, the Milky Way. Detected by the NuSTAR Space Telescope, an unexplained signal emanated from the center of our galaxy, a region dominated by the gravitational behemoth, the supermassive black hole Sagittarius A. This unusual signal, detected in the radio wave spectrum, posed several intriguing questions. Was it perhaps a signal from a previously undiscovered celestial body, or some unforeseen interaction of known cosmic objects? Or could it be an indication of dark matter, the elusive substance that makes up about 85% of the universe's mass? While the nature and source of this galactic center radio signal remain undetermined, it underscores the cosmic riddles that surround us, even in our own galactic backyard. Whether we're probing the distant reaches of our universe or exploring our own galaxy's heart, these celestial signals remind us that our universe continues to be a grand puzzle, offering more questions than answers. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Orphan Afterglow. In the cosmic theater, the year 2019 marked a peculiar detection that challenged the norm. Astronomers using the Chandra X-ray Observatory observed a unique phenomenon, an X-ray burst that was strikingly alone, without its usual precursor, a gamma-ray burst. The cosmic enigma was dubbed an Orphan Afterglow. Typically, gamma-ray bursts, the most energetic explosions in the universe, precede X-ray bursts. These gamma-ray events often indicate the birth of a black hole or a neutron star, and the subsequent X-ray afterglow is the lingering echo of this cataclysmic event. However, the Orphan Afterglow seemed to defy this established pattern. The solitary X-ray burst appeared without a detectable gamma-ray burst, sparking curiosity and speculation among the scientific community. What could have caused such an event? Was it merely that the gamma-ray burst was directed away from Earth, or were there alternative processes at play? In our number 7 spot today, we have the Vela pulsar glitch. In the cosmos, even the most predictable celestial bodies can sometimes throw astronomers a bit of a curveball. This was the case in 2000 with the Vela pulsar, a pulsar that, despite being one of the most observed and best studied, presented an unexpected event that left astronomers scratching their heads. The event, fittingly termed a glitch, saw the pulsar suddenly rotating faster than it usually did. Located about 1,000 light-years away in the Vela constellation, the Vela pulsar is a type of neutron star that emits regular beams of electromagnetic radiation out into space. Since its discovery in 1968, it has become one of the most watched celestial objects due to its regularity, allowing scientists to predict its rotations with impressive accuracy. However, in 2000, this predictable rhythm was abruptly disrupted. The Vela pulsar experienced an unexpected acceleration in its rotation. While this pulsar is known to quote-unquote glitch every 3 years or so, the 2000 event was noteworthy due to its scale. The sudden spin-up was larger and more dramatic than anything observed previously, leading to much speculation and study. This intriguing event challenged existing theories about pulsar glitches and their internal structure. Despite decades of observation, the Vela pulsar reminded us that the universe still has countless mysteries to be unraveled. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Green Bank Telescope FRB. In 2012, the vast expanse of our cosmos spoke once again, this time with a signal captured by the Green Bank Telescope, located in West Virginia in the United States. This signal wasn't a gentle whisper, but a bold, intense burst of radio waves, a fast radio burst, or an FRB. FRBs are brief yet powerful blasts of radio waves that come from distant parts of the cosmos, lasting only a few milliseconds. The source of the Green Bank Telescope FRB, much like other FRBs, remains remains an enigma. These fast radio bursts, due to their brevity and unpredictable nature, have been notoriously difficult to trace back to their origin, and this one was no exception. Since their first detection in 2007, FRBs have posed a significant challenge to astronomers. What cosmic phenomena could generate such powerful yet fleeting signals? Theories range from highly magnetized neutron stars to extragalactic civilization. The Green Bank Telescope FRB added another layer to this cosmic mystery, an enigma still being explored and deciphered by scientists across the globe. In our number 5 spot today, we have Tabby's star. This star, which has also been referenced as the WTF star, is an F-type main sequence star which is located in the constellation Cygnus, about 1,470 light-years away from Earth. This star is of particular importance because of the fact that it shows unusual light shifts, which includes a 22% dimming in brightness. Basically, from our point of view, something continually blocks the star, and it likely isn't a planet, because a Jupiter-sized planet would only block about 1% of a star the size of this one. So what could it possibly be? There are a few theories out there surrounding this anomaly, but none are able to fully explain what is happening here. Some believe that it is some sort of uneven ring of dust orbiting the star, and others believe that the star's luminosity fluctuates depending on the efficiency of the heat being transported to its photosphere. These are just two of the theories surrounding this star, but there are many more out there, and at this point, we just don't know. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Black Widow pulsar. Unveiling the drama of the cosmos, our universe revealed an intense astronomical spectacle in 1988. Astronomers detected a fascinating object, a pulsar known as the Black Widow pulsar, or PSR B1957+20. Pulsars are neutron stars, remnants of supernova explosions characterized by emitting regular beams of radiation as they spin. However, the Black Widow pulsar stands out from its kin due to a unique and somewhat macabre characteristic. Located approximately 6,500 light-years away from Earth in the constellation of Sagittarius, this pulsar is locked in a destructive cosmic dance with its companion star. As they revolve around each other, the pulsar's intense gravitational pull and radiation are steadily vaporizing its unfortunate partner. The process resembles a venomous black widow spider consuming its mate, hence the name. The pulsar's companion, initially comparable in mass to our Sun, is now merely a tenth of that, stripped away by the relentless energy of the Black Widow. The radiation emitted from this process is intense and rhythmic, like a cosmic lighthouse casting regular signals into the depths of space. Despite the seemingly predatory nature of the Black Widow pulsar, it provides astronomers with an exceptional opportunity to study the effects of extreme gravity and radiation on stellar bodies. This astronomical phenomenon encapsulates the sheer power, violence, and strange beauty of the universe, reminding us of the dynamic and often brutal processes at play in the cosmos. In our number 3 spot today, we have Hoag's object. Okay, so there are different shapes to galaxies. That's not the weirdest thing in the world. You know that we live in a spiral-shaped one. It's beautiful. There are other galaxies called ellipticals that are more like oval shapes, but one galaxy in particular, which is now called Hoag's object, is truly like none we've ever seen. Just realizing, how do we get a name like the Milky Way and then they get a name like Hoag's object? Just would be a horrible name for a galaxy. This galaxy has a yellow core, and this core is surrounded by an outer ring of blue stars that are much younger than the core, but in the middle between the two, there's just nothing, and researchers are completely stumped as to how it could have formed. The galaxy was first discovered in the 1950s, and since then, there is one leading theory as to how it could have been formed, but it still isn't concrete. Basically, the leading theory suggests that perhaps a small galaxy sped through a larger disc-shaped galaxy, which then created this bizarre situation. But the problem with this theory is that there are no signs of any nearby galaxies that could have served as the sort of bullet in this scenario. If that happened, it also would have sped up the core of Hoag's object, but we can observe it as moving quite slowly, so that also rules out this theory. There have been other galaxies discovered that have some similar characteristics to this one, but none share all the qualities seen in this very bizarre galaxy. In our number 2 spot today, we have the mysterious gap. A new analysis analysis by scientists at MIT of ancient meteorites found something new and very interesting. In the early solar system, there was what is referred to as a protoplanetary disk of dust and gas that rotated around the sun, and eventually it coalesced into the planets that we all know and love today. So this new study and analysis suggests that a sort of mysterious gap existed within this disk somewhere around 4.567 billion years ago, and it was in an area near where the asteroid belt is today. The reason this gap is mysterious is because it isn't quite clear what the cause of this gap was. There are a few possibilities, including Jupiter, during the time when it began to take its shape. Because of its extremely large gravitational pull, it could have pushed gas and dust towards the outskirts, which then would leave a gap in the developing disk. There are other possibilities, but regardless of whatever caused this gap, it is said to have likely served as a cosmic boundary that kept material on either side from interacting with each other. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have shooting stars. Okay, so we often look to the night sky in an attempt to see a shooting star, and the chances might be pretty good depending on how light polluted the area is. I mean, either that or you're seeing one of the Starlink satellites, but either way, we know that shooting stars aren't really stars at all, and are instead meteors burning up as they quickly move through Earth's atmosphere. But what if I told you that there really are some shooting stars that are actually stars? Hypervelocity stars were discovered by astronomers in 2005, and it is thought that they occur or form when a binary star system, or a star system that has 2 stars, gets destroyed by a black hole. One of the stars in the system will usually fall into the black hole, which may just send the other one flying across space as fast as millions of miles per hour. It's definitely not the same thing that we think of when we think of shooting stars, but it definitely is quite the galactic event.
Is there anything more mysterious and foreboding in the vastness of space than a black hole?
Scientists still aren't sure exactly what happens to the material that gets sucked into these things, and hopefully we'll never have to find out firsthand. Anyway, sit back, try to relax, as we bring you some of the scariest black holes ever observed.
Recently discovered within a dwarf satellite galaxy that goes by the name of Leo 1. Now, a satellite galaxy basically just means it's a smaller galaxy caught in the orbit of our own galaxy. Think satellites orbiting Earth, but scaled way up. The black hole was discovered in late 2021 by an independent team of astronomers who had been scanning the small galaxy in order to measure its levels of dark matter. Upon closer inspection, they found what they considered to be an unusually small amount of dark matter, but as I mentioned earlier, an unusually large black hole sitting at the center of the galaxy. You see, compared to the Milky Way, the Leo 1 is considered to be quite tiny. But the kicker here is that the black hole discovered within its parameters is almost as large as one found in our very own much larger galaxy, meaning this is an unprecedented mass ratio that up until now had never been seen before. Now, don't worry too much though, as this particular black hole is currently 830,000 light years away. But that being said, if Leo 1 were to begin sinking into our own galaxy, it is entirely possible that this recently discovered black hole just might collide with one of the Milky Way's very own, resulting in, well, let's just say it wouldn't be pretty.
So my first pick is the very recently discovered Scary Barbie. Imagine if we all met our end getting swallowed up by a black hole named Scary Barbie. What would the extraterrestrials watching us think of that? Looking at us through their highly advanced telescopes, light years away. Planet designated Earth has undergone absorption into cosmic singularity, denoted as black hole, bearing nomenclature akin to one of their curious humanoid toy entities known as Barbie. And they'd all burst out laughing. I feel like we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure with that one. But this Scary Barbie formation is no joke. Scientists first observed this supermassive black hole devouring a star, sucking it in and ripping it apart in a process known as spaghettification. Apparently, Scary Barbie really suits its name. It's super vibrant, luminous. Danny Miloslajevic, an assistant professor of physics and astronomy, said that it is, quote, the most energetic phenomenon I have ever encountered. Apparently it's brighter than 1,000 supernovas combined, and supernovas are some of the most luminous objects in the sky. Another fascinating thing about this thing is that it's classified as transient, meaning it can show up or disappear not over the course of centuries or millennia, but in mere hours or days. Now, most transients like this aren't around for very long, maybe a handful of months at most, but Barbie's been around longer than any other observed transient and is apparently still evolving.
Well, that's one Barbie I definitely don't want to party with. Next on the list we have Sagittarius A. And before you switch the video, no, I'm not talking about astrology, but rather the supermassive black hole that sits right smack bang in the center of the Milky Way. You know that place where Earth is? Okay, before you start doomsday prepping, I will let you know that this particular black hole is not actually super active, meaning it's not gobbling up the stars and planets around it nearly as fast as some of the other black holes discovered in recent years. However, it is growing, more so in relation to the natural growth of the galaxy, meaning its size in relation to the size of the Milky Way has pretty much remained the same. So again, no need to panic, for now. While Sagittarius A is the largest black hole within our own galaxy that we're currently aware of, I'm happy to report that it's not the closest, as it sits some 26,670 light years away from Earth. However, having said that out loud, I'm not really sure it's all that comforting.
Alright, next up on the list is M87. This one sits right at the center of the galaxy Virgo A. So luckily, it's not anywhere near us, but the universe can be a pretty unpredictable place. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not a scientist, but when I read that this thing is billions of times larger than our sun, yeah, it kind of freaks me out a little, right? In fact, it's about 6.5 billion times the size. I don't even know how to visualize a number that big. Now, what makes this black hole particularly famous is that it was the first black hole ever to be directly imaged by the Event Horizon telescope in 2019. The Event Horizon is the boundary around a black hole where beyond it, nothing can return. The image showed a dark shadow surrounded by a ring of bright, hot gas swirling around the black hole. The dark shadow is where the light gets trapped by the black hole's gravity.
Now this next one hits just a bit closer to home than the rest of them, and by that I mean it's quite literally the closest black hole to Earth that has been discovered to date. Going by the name of Gaia BH1, when it was first discovered in 2022, scientists were both shocked and bewildered, as this black hole sits 10 times closer to Earth than previous record holder, sitting at a mere 1,500 light years away. And if that weren't already uncomfortable enough, the Gaia BH1 has a mass of 9.62 times the mass of our sun, which of course gives it a large gravitational pull. In fact, our bewilderingly close dark companion actually has a star-like sun of its own that orbits around its massive parameter. While scientists deem that this giant is not of any immediate threat, it should be noted that its proximity to Earth alone makes it an incredibly ominous neighbor, as should the black hole decide to change its predominantly dormant ways, it could spell disaster for us all. What would you do if you knew it was your last day on Earth?
Alright, this next one's pretty alarming as well. Its designation is J114447.77-4. It goes on and on, but it's J1144 for short. Just still not a very catchy name either. This one happens to be the fastest growing black hole of the past 9 billion years. That's the alarming part, in case you weren't sure. So what does this thing's diet consist of? Well, it devours the equivalent of one whole Earth per second. It was first observed by scientists in June of 2022, and it was 3 billion times larger than our sun and just continues to grow. This also makes it 500 times bigger than our very own Sagittarius A, discussed earlier. J1144 is also 7,000 times more luminous than all the light in the Milky Way combined. It's so bright that you don't even need to be a pro astronomer to see it. Just grab a telescope that's at least 30 to 40 centimeters across. Try that. Let us know how it goes for you in the comments.
And of course we had to include none other than Gaia BH2. Sound familiar? Holding the record for the second closest black hole to Earth, Gaia BH2 comes in at just about 3,800 light years away and just about 2,200 light years away from Gaia BH1. With a mass of 8 times that of our sun, we are counting our lucky stars that as of most recent monitoring, Gaia BH2 appears to be mostly dormant. But hey, New year, new black hole, right? Now, because of its proximity to Earth, along with its proximity to our other big scary friend, Gaia BH1, while it's not probable, the risk of Gaia BH2 ending the world lies in the possibility that the two mass-packed giants collide. And if that happens, well, simply put, the violent process would send ripples surging through the very fabric and time of space. I mean, I'm all for a day out on the water, but that's one riptide I definitely wouldn't want to get caught up in.
Alright, next we have V404 Cygni. So this is a binary system in space that includes a black hole and a companion star. This system became kind of well known in the scientific world because of some pretty intense and honestly spooky behavior. So back in 2015, V404 Cygni was especially active. NASA's SWIFT satellite detected it emitting powerful X-ray bursts. These bursts were so strong that they temporarily made V404 Cygni one of the brightest objects in the sky. Now, what makes this thing intriguing, but kind of scary to imagine, is the process behind this burst of activity. As material from the companion star gets too close to the black hole, it doesn't fall in smoothly. Instead, it forms a hot, swirling disk around the black hole, and during this process, it releases a huge amount of energy, including X-rays. And these X-ray flares are kind of like space fireworks. That meant the black hole was on a feeding frenzy of sorts.
Get ready, because next on the list we have none other than Ton 618, aptly named as it is the largest black hole to have ever been observed by scientists. Discovered in 1957, Ton 618 sits at a comforting 10.37 billion light-years away from Earth. So while not the furthest, that title goes to an unnamed abyss, which sits at an even more comfortable 31 billion light-years away from Earth, the Ton is still pretty far. The bone-chilling mass-hoarding phenomenon was first observed from an observatory in Mexico, and because of its active nature, it has been closely monitored since then. Now, I bet a ton of you watching are just dying to know how big this thing really is. Well, okay. Ton 618 is estimated to be a mighty 66 billion times the mass of our sun, which means that even though it is pretty far away, it could just as easily swallow our entire solar system whole without even so much as a drink of water if it really wanted to. The fact that we've never actually seen this happen might sound comforting, but the truth is, that means we really just don't know what we're up against.
Alright, and finally we have Cygnus X1. This has to be one of the most famous black holes ever observed. It was discovered during a rocket flight in 1971. Rush made a song about it, because of course they did. Like, that news came out and Geddy Lee was like, we have to write a song about this. You could say Rush, I guess, wrote the song in a hurry. It's also been referenced in Futurama and Godzilla. Cygnus X1 is another duo featuring a black hole and a massive companion star. This one was one of the first strong black hole candidates ever identified. Cygnus X1 consists of a star about 20 times more massive than our sun, and right by it is a black hole. The black hole is stealing material from the star, forming a swirling disk of super hot gas around it. So I could see the jokes in the comments. Super hot gas, black hole. The material swirling into the black hole gets incredibly hot, emitting X-rays that can be detected by telescopes in space.
Number 10. Oumuamua asteroid. Despite the advances in lens technology and telescopy, there are things that still take scientists by surprise. Shocking, I know. When the interstellar visitor Oumuamua crossed our solar system in 2017, experts could not complain its origins. Not to mention, Oumuamua is the first interstellar object detected passing through the solar system. It was discovered by Robert Work using Pan-STARRS telescope at Leakula Observatory, Hawaii on October 19, 2017, approximately 40 days after it passed its closest point to the sun on September 9th. When it was first observed
observed, it was about 33 million kilometers from Earth. It is a small object estimated to be between 300 and 3,000 feet long, with its width and thickness both estimated between 115 and 148 feet. It has a red color similar to objects in the outer solar system and has a surface similar to comets. The observation suggests that this unusual object had been wandering through the Milky Way, unattached to any star system, for hundreds of millions of years before its chance encounter with our star system. For decades, we've theorized such interstellar objects out there, and now for the first time we have direct evidence they exist, said Thomas Zerbetchen, Associate Administrator of NASA's Science Mission Directorate in Washington in November 2017. Number 9. A giant slug on Pluto. Yup, you heard that right. These days, NASA continues to receive new data from its New Horizons probe. The data, which includes imagery and measurements collected by the craft's camera and instruments, continues to provide new and surprising details about Pluto's varied surface. For example, in this photo, it seems like there's a slug on Pluto. Is it a slug though? I'm not too sure. The bizarre image was taken in 2015. The photo covers an area of Pluto that's part of an icy plain, informally as Sputnik Planum. NASA puts the pitted surface into perspective by saying its surface is separated into cells or polygons 10 to 25 miles wide, and when viewed at low sun angles with visible shadows, the cells are seen to have slightly raised centers and rigid margins, with about 100 yards of overall height variation. So Pluto is not the same as Earth, in case any of you were still confused out there. But what is this slug? Is Pluto ruled by slugs? Well, according to IFL Science, this extraterrestrial gastropod is actually a block of ice, which is disappointing. So no slugs, but just ice. Well, that's what they say. Number 8. Faces on Mars. As reported by Space, this shocking picture, appropriately named the face of Mars, was taken by NASA's Viking spacecraft in 1976. Viking 1 spacecraft was circling the planet, snapping photos of possible landing sites for a sister ship, Viking 2, when it spotted the shadowy likeness of a human face. An enormous head nearly 2 miles from end to end seemed to be staring back at the cameras. While some experts explain this image with the phenomenon of seeing faces in objects and patterns known as pareidolia, many still believe this is evidence of extraterrestrial life. I mean, come on, there's literally faces there. Could it be the faces of people who were buried there? And why are there so many faces? What do they mean? I need answers. Number 7. Dark matter. Dark matter is a hypothetical form of matter thought to account for approximately 85% of the matter in the universe. Dark matter is called dark because it does not appear to interact with the electromagnetic field, which means it does not absorb, reflect, or emit electromagnetic radiation, and is therefore difficult to detect. We're more certain of what dark matter isn't rather than what it is. It's not made of black holes, the light warping they'd cause isn't present. NASA telescopes have helped us better understand this mysterious invisible matter that is 5 times the mass of regular matter. The first direct detection of dark matter was made in 2007 through observations of the Bullet cluster of galaxies by the Chandra X-ray telescope, and we continue to learn more every day. Number 6. Black holes. A black hole is a region of space-time where gravity is so strong that nothing, including light or other electromagnetic waves, have enough energy to escape its event horizon. Although we can't see black holes, scientists have been able to study them by observing how they interact with the environment around them with telescopes like Swift, Chandra, and Hubble. In 2017, NASA's Swift telescope mapped the death spiral of a star as it is consumed by a black hole. Later, astronomers used Chandra to have discovered evidence for thousands of black holes located near the center of our Milky Way galaxy, which scares me. Number 5. Kepler 186f. Kepler 186f is the first rocky exoplanet to be found within the habitable zone, as the region around the host star has the temperature that is right for liquid water. The planet is also very close in size to Earth. While planets have previously been found in the habitable zone, they are at least 40% larger in size than Earth, and understanding their makeup is challenging. Kepler 186f is more reminiscent of Earth. Although the size of Kepler 186f is unknown, its mass and composition are not. Previous research, however, suggests that a planet the size of Kepler 186f is likely to be rocky. Even though we may not find out what's going on the surface of this planet anytime soon, it's a strong reminder of why new technologies are being developed that will enable scientists get a closer look at distant worlds, but we still have a lot to learn. Number 4. Tabby star. Tabby star is an F-type main sequence star in the constellation Cygnus, approximately 1,470 light-years away from Earth. Tabby star is one of the most exciting NASA discoveries. According to Science Alert, Tabby star is a yellow-white dwarf star with random dimming. Some believe that Tabby star is a planet or a moon that has escaped its planet. Unusual light fluctuations of the star, including up to 22% dimming in brightness, were discovered by citizen scientists as part of the Planet Hunters project. In September 2015, astronomers and citizen scientists associated with the project posted a preprint of an article describing the data and multiple interpretations. The discovery was made from data collected from the Kepler Space Telescope, which observed changes in the brightness of distant stars to detect exoplanets. Number 3. The Great Void. The Giant Void is an extremely large region of space with an underdensity of galaxies and located in the constellation Canis Venatici. It is the second largest confirmed void to date with an estimated diameter to 1.3 billion light-years, and its center is approximately 1.5 billion light-years away. It was discovered in 1988 and was the largest void in the northern galactic hemisphere and possibly the second largest ever detected. Unlike a black hole, the Giant Void isn't a hole in space. Instead, it's curiously empty of both matter and dark matter. And also different from a black hole, light can pass through the void, though scientists believe it contains dark energy. Number 2. Great Red Spot. The Great Red Spot is a persistent high-pressure region in the atmosphere of Jupiter, producing an anticyclonic storm that's the largest in the solar system. Located 22 degrees south of Jupiter's equator, it produces wind speeds up to 268 miles per hour. Observations from 1665 to 1713 are believed to be of the same storm, and if that is correct, it has existed for at least 358 years. It was next observed in September 1831, when it was 4 times bigger, with 60 recorded observations between then and 1878, when continuous observations began. According to Business Insider, the reason why this high Curious pressure spot is disappearing is still unclear. Amy Simon, an expert in planetary atmospheres at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, said learning more about Jupiter and its Great Red Spot could help scientists understand Earth's weather system better. Jupiter's weather functions under the same physics as Earth, she said, just millions of miles farther from the sun. Amy also said Jupiter studies could improve our understanding of worlds beyond our solar system. If you just look at reflected light from an extrasolar planet, you're not going to be able to tell what it's made of, she said. Looking at as many possible different cases in our own solar system could enable us to then apply that knowledge to extrasolar planets. Studies predict Jupiter's upper atmosphere has clouds consisting of ammonia, ammonium hydrosulfide, and water. Still, scientists don't know exactly how or even whether these chemicals react to give colors like those in the Great Red Spot. And coming in at number 1 are gamma ray bursts. Gamma ray bursts are another mysterious space phenomenon that NASA cannot fully understand. As reported by Earth's sky, gamma ray bursts originate in the beam of radiation during stellar explosions, such as supernova or hypernova. On Sunday, October 9th, 2022, a pulse of intense radiation swept through the solar system so exceptional that astronomers quickly called it the brightest of all time. The burst triggered detectors on numerous spacecrafts and observatories around the globe followed up. After combing through all of this data, astronomers can now characterize just how bright it was and better understand its scientific impact. GRB 221009A was likely the brightest burst at X-ray and gamma ray energies to occur since human civilization began, said Eric Burns, an assistant professor of physics and astronomy at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. The burst was so bright it effectively blinded most gamma ray instruments in space, which means they could not directly record the real intensity of the emission. US scientists were able to reconstruct this information from its Fermi data. The signal from GRB 221009A had been traveling for about 1.9 billion years before it reached Earth, making it among the closest known long GRBs whose initial or prompt emission lasts more than 2 seconds. Astronomers think these bursts represent the birth cries of black holes formed when the cores of massive stars collapse under their own weight. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 terrifying photos from other planets NASA can't even explain. Number 10. Extended space travel can change your DNA. Astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a year at the International Space Station in 2016, returned to find out that he was 2 inches taller than his departing height. The new physical differences between Kelly and his identical brother, Mike, also an astronaut, were startling. Scientists compared the DNA of the two and found that besides growing 2 inches, Kelly's gut bacteria was completely different and his gene expression had changed. Scientists concluded that the changes were caused by the stresses of space travel, which can cause changes in a cell's biological pathways. Now, although Kelly eventually returned to his original height, his other genetic changes were seemingly irreversible, meaning Kelly and his brother are no longer identical twins, which is insane. Number 9. Time on Earth moves faster than time in space. Yes, this isn't just something that was made up for the film Interstellar, it's a real thing. Time moves differently in space. Due to time dilation, a perceptive theory of relativity referencing a difference in the elapsed time measured by 2 observers, astronauts stationed in outer space lose approximately 1 second per week. The spin of Earth, its orbit around the Sun, and the solar system's motion around the Milky Way all combine to decrease the time we experience on Earth. Though minuscule, the second per week dilation results in nearly a minute lost annually and more than 8.5 minutes lost each decade. Number 8. An astronaut was covered in toxic ammonia during a spacewalk. Bob Kirby was no stranger to spacewalking when he was installing upgrades to the International Space Station. But while out there, a cooling line broke and spewed toxic ammonia all over his suit. Now, for those of you who don't know, a spacecraft is a closed system, meaning that the only air that you have to work with is the air you brought up with you. Now, first Bob had to stop the leak, then he had to figure out how he was going to get back in the space shuttle without bringing the volatile ammonia contaminating his spacesuit. But some good old-fashioned science helped with that one. Ammonia has a low boiling point, so he just needed to vaporize it off his suit. To do this, he simply baked himself in sunlight for an extra 30 minutes, arguably one of the most surreal and terrifying sunbathing methods a human can experience. Later, a fellow astronaut brushed off the suit and equipment. To be extra cautious, they partially vented the shuttle airlock, and next, to be even more careful, the shuttle crew all wore oxygen masks inside until they were positive nothing had made its way in. Nothing did make its way in, thankfully, but that sounds like a terrifying experience. Number 7. Magnetic explosions. Every day, the space around Earth booms with giant explosions. Yup, explosions. When the solar wind, the stream of charged particles from the sun, pushes against the magnetic environment that surrounds and protects Earth, it tangles the sun and Earth's magnetic fields. Eventually, the magnetic field lines snap and realign, shooting away nearby charged particles. This explosive event is known as a magnetic reconnection. While we can't see magnetic reconnection with our bare eyes, we can see its effects. Occasionally, some of the perturbed particles pour into Earth's upper atmosphere, where they spark the auras. Magnetic reconnection happens all across the universe, wherever there are twisting magnetic fields. NASA missions like the magnetospheric multiscale mission measure reconnection events around Earth, which helps scientists understand reconnection where it's harder to study, like in flares on the sun, in areas surrounding black holes, and around other stars. I just don't like the idea of things constantly exploding around us, and we can't do anything about it. Number 6. A jammed solar panel threatened the safety of the entire ISS. Astronaut Scott Parzynski had to install a new module on the ISS that would serve as a node for the addition of future research laboratories. Part of the mission required changing the location of an array of solar panels. Things were going along really well until the crew inside commanded these larger solar panels to extend, he said. They got jammed up and the panels began to tear. It was unsafe to continue to extend this panel any further, you couldn't retract it either, Scott said. There was concern that if we even tried to undock the space shuttle, it might rip apart and hit the shuttle. After 72 hours of grueling work on the ground, NASA came up with a plan. Scott would have to travel further away from the safety of an airlock than had ever been previously attempted. It wasn't only the distance that was nerve-wracking. As Scott explained, there was a real danger that we could do even worse damage to the space station. Then there was a partial risk to myself, because if there was any metal-to-metal connection with the solar panel or arcing, it could actually electrocute me or cause ignition of the 100% oxygen in my spacesuit. All the tools I was working with had to be specially insulated. the metal parts of my spacesuit had to be wrapped in special tape, he said. Thankfully, everything worked out and the mission was a success, and Scott has said, I still to this day think it's one of NASA's greatest accomplishments. Number 5. Astronauts must drink recycled sweat and urine. This isn't as scary as it's just gross. Water is a limited resource in space, and because of this, astronauts must resort to recycling their own waste. It only takes about 8 days for the systems on the space station to process water. NASA astronaut Scott Kelly consumed approximately 730 liters of recycled urine and sweat during his year-long mission. It tastes like bottled water, says Lane Carter, the water subsystem manager for the ISS at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. I don't really trust him though. He continued, as long as you can psychologically get past the point that it's recycled urine and condensate that comes out of the air. Now, condensate is the collected breath and sweat of the crew, shower runoff, and urine from animals on board the station. 93% of all water on board is reclaimed, according to a video posted by Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield while he was on the space station in 2013. We can recycle about 6,000 extra liters of water for the station every year, he said. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, but I don't think I could do that. Number 4. There are floating animal corpses in space. Okay, well this sounds strange right away, but this makes sense considering the first test subjects to make it to space were animals. Before space programs started sending people up into orbit, scientists couldn't agree on what it would be like for a living organism to leave Earth's atmosphere. What would be the effects of weightlessness on a mammal? How would the body handle radiation from the sun? So instead of sending people up in such a risky situation, the United States and Russia sent monkeys, chimps, dogs, and other animals into space in order to analyze such effects. And when a seemingly good thing turned into a failure, these animal corpses were launched into space where they reportedly float to this day and can be seen by astronauts making trips to space. While this is sad, this scene can seem a bit creepy too. Just imagine animal corpses floating around against the backdrop of a black and infinite space, and you have to just go on doing what you came to do. I also feel like this would make me feel sad if I was an astronaut and was missing my pet and saw that. Number 3. Space music. Sound needs a medium to travel, and thus it cannot be heard in the vacuum of space. Yet, astronauts have returned to Earth with fascinating tales of hearing odd noises while in space, which is terrifying. During the Apollo 10 mission, which was a test run for sending the first men to the moon, astronauts were carrying various equipment with them which was being tested to withstand space as they were deemed essential for the moon landing. While circling the moon, the astronauts on the vessel heard a certain whistling sort of music. The music lasted for almost an hour and creeped the living daylights out of the astronauts. One of them described the sound as a sort of otherworldly music. On returning to Earth, the astronauts struggled for a while on whether or not to tell NASA and the rest of the world about what they experienced. Later, astronaut Michael Collins, who was also part of the Apollo 11 mission with Aldrin and Armstrong, revealed hearing similar music while on the moon's surface. An engineer from US Space Agency said the noises likely came from interference caused by radios within the lunar and the command modules. However, Al Worden, an astronaut on Apollo 15, disputed the explanation. Number 2. Space snake. Retired NASA astronaut Dr. Story Musgrave has accomplished a lot in his career as a spaceman. Only the second astronaut to fly on 6 space flights, Dr. Musgrave is also the most formally educated astronaut with 6 academic degrees. He is also the only astronaut to fly aboard all 5 space shuttles. With all this, he seems to be a really credible source, and he has claimed that he saw an 8-foot-long white snake floating through space. Now, it's not hard to imagine that this could have been a hose detached from the spacecraft, but Dr. Musgrave remains adamant. He claims that he observed the 6 to 8 foot long eel or serpent-like creature on not 1 but 2 of his space flights. During multiple interviews, Dr. Musgrave has insisted that alien life is out there and that he has observed it, which is just scary. And coming in at number 1, they're on the moon watching us. When astronaut Neil Armstrong took a walk on the moon and became the first man to do so in 1969, many conspiracy theories came to light. For one, people claimed he didn't actually go to the moon and that the footage was recorded in a studio. Of the many conspiracy theories surrounding this moment, there's one that remains a mystery to date. During the Apollo 11 mission, after Neil landed on the moon, NASA claims to have lost transmission for roughly 2 minutes. minutes. And in a reportedly secret message to NASA, Neil said, "These babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh my god, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon, watching us." Now that sounds absolutely terrifying, and whether this is true or not, the fact that NASA lost transmission with Neil for 2 minutes is scary within itself. Being out in space on a different planet and being completely alone is terrifying.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the docking procedure. Chris Hadfield is one of the best known astronauts of all time, and he had quite a harrowing story on his first space flight. During this flight, he and his fellow astronauts had the pleasure of somehow navigating a $250,000 shuttle towards a target on the Mir space station that was about the size of a coffee cup. Yeah, the most tense few minutes of their lives, I can imagine. Chris's job was to watch and communicate the speed and range information to the pilot, which is a super important job, obviously, because it's such a precise thing. There's a time window, they have to be traveling at just the right speed, and they need to be accurate. Chris explained, quote, "If you hit Mir just a little too soft, then the spring mechanisms would bounce you off." He went on to say, quote, "If you hit Mir just a little too hard, then you would break Mir in half and kill the 3 people on board. So you've got to hit it exactly right." Yeah, definitely high stakes at this point. So when the crew is about 30 feet away, their 2 sensors start telling them completely different things. One said 32 feet and the other said 20 feet. Chris said, quote, "They're either both wrong or one of them is completely wrong. Now, what do? There's nobody to ask. If the crew on board the flight deck of the shuttle don't solve this problem in the next 30 seconds, then the whole flight is bust and done." Instead of panicking, however, Chris explained that he just went, quote, "back to basics." This insanely intelligent person knew the dimensions of the docking module, so he used his thumb to help him sort of eyeball the distance through a window. I mean, that alone is just wild. Apparently this helped him to figure out that they were 21 feet away, not 32. He used his stopwatch to figure out the math of how fast they were going and when the thrusters should be fired, and thankfully, he was spot on. Chris finished the story by saying, quote, "It wasn't for a few minutes before one of us looked around and said, 'Hey, we did it, we're actually here.' That was a big relief of emotion on board." Yeah, I can imagine. In our number 9 spot today, we have the gas leak. In July of 1975, the Apollo-Soyuz test project took place, which was a historic moment for both space travel as well as just for politics. This was the first joint spaceflight between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it marked the end of the space race. And while it started off extremely smoothly and was going well, this flight soon became known for an entirely different reason. On return, the 2 spacecrafts, the American one holding 3 astronauts and the Soviet one holding 2 cosmonauts, met in orbit around the Earth and docked to each other. Here the group began exchanging information, they were speaking each other's language to make communication easier, and also just as a sign of respect. Things were going amazingly considering the recent history. After 44 hours together they parted, and after a few more days they were on their descents back to Earth. During re-entry, however, a malfunction with the reaction control system, which is the system that controls the altitude, this malfunction ended up causing highly poisonous nitrogen tetroxide to enter the cabin where the American astronauts were. Thankfully, once this spacecraft landed, the cabin becomes ventilated, which gave them time to be rescued without being fatally injured. The astronauts on board were rushed to the hospital and were found to have developed a form of pneumonia that is caused from chemicals, but within weeks they all recovered and lived to tell the tale of this historic spaceflight. In our number 8 spot today, we have Mir EO-23. This is the name of a mission that was part of the Shuttle Mir space program, which was a, quote, "collaborative 11-mission space program between Russia and the United States that involved American space shuttles visiting the Russian space station Mir, Russian cosmonauts flying on the shuttle, and an American astronaut flying aboard a Soyuz spacecraft to engage in long-duration expeditions aboard Mir." During this mission, on February 23, 1997, a backup solid fuel oxygen canister ended up catching fire. This fire was in one module, but it quickly began to spew molten metal, and the crew on board was concerned that it could melt through the hull of the space station. Smoke began to fill the station, and the crew were forced to use respirators to continue breathing, but of course when it rains it pours, and some of the respirators were faulty and didn't supply oxygen. After burning for for 14 minutes and the crew using up 3 fire extinguishers, the fire was thankfully put out. The smoke, however, remained thick for another 45 minutes. This was probably one of the most terrifying things that the crew went through, but this certainly was not the end of the road of struggles for these guys. Let me know down below in the comments if you want a part 2 of this video, and maybe we can cover the rest of what went wrong on this mission. In our number 7 spot today we have Apollo 13. Definitely one of the most well-known space missions ever. Apollo 13 is famous for all of the most terrifying reasons. This mission was the 7th crewed mission in the Apollo space program, and it was the 3rd that was meant to land on the moon. The spacecraft launched on April 11th, 1970, but the mission to land on the moon was quickly aborted 2 days into the flight after an oxygen tank in the service module failed. A quote routine stir of an oxygen tank ignited damaged wire insulation inside it, causing an explosion that vented the contents of both the service module's oxygen tanks to space. Without this oxygen that's needed for breathing and for generating electric power, the service module's propulsion as well as their life support systems were just unable to operate. This meant that the command module systems had to be shut down in order to conserve the resources it had left for re-entry. This meant that the crew had to transfer to the lunar module as a sort of lifeboat. The lunar module was only designed to support 2 men on the moon's surface for 2 days, so Mission Control had to create new procedures so that it could support 3 men for 4 days. The crew was in for some of the most difficult times while the ground crew worked to help bring them home alive. Safe to say everyone was as stressed out as they could possibly be. Thankfully, the crew on board the ship were returned to Earth safely, and this story, although horrifying, did wonders to restore public interest in the Apollo program. This story is one of the most famous space stories ever, thanks to the several dramatizations made about it. In our number 6 spot today we have the STS-27 disaster. During the launch of STS-27, which took place in 1988, debris from the right solid rocket booster struck the underside of the craft, which ended up severely damaging over 700 tiles on the outside of the craft, as well as taking off 1 tile completely. It might not seem like a lot, but every little thing matters when you're doing something like going to space. So it's important to note that this mission was classified because of the fact that there was a surveillance satellite being launched along with it. Because of this, things had to be done a little differently, so when the crew on board sent photos of the damage back to the ground, the photos were encrypted and they were extremely low quality. Mission Control deemed the damage to be just light and shadows and told the crew to continue, much to their dismay. Once landed, it became clear that Atlantis was the single most damaged shuttle that was thankfully able to successfully land. The survival of the crew came down to basically happenstance, which is just terrifying. This was only the 2nd mission after the disaster of the Challenger, so should this one have gone fatal, we likely wouldn't have seen the continuation of the program. In our number 5 spot today we have the organic object. Leland Melvin is an American engineer and retired NASA astronaut who served on board the space shuttle Atlantis as a mission specialist. He is an incredibly brilliant man with an incredible resume, and that is exactly why this story is so unnerving. He claimed that while on a space mission as he was orbiting Earth, which for the record, how cool would it be able to tell a story like that? You're just orbiting Earth. While he was on this mission, he saw a quote alien-like organic object. NASA disputed his claims and said that what he saw was just ice, but I feel like I trust the person who actually saw it with their own eyes. Leland went on to write that whatever he saw was quote translucent, curved, organic looking. I have no explanations to offer, but I will say it certainly is interesting and a little bit terrifying. In our number 4 spot today we have the space snake. Dr. Franklin Story Musgrave is an American physician and retired NASA astronaut, and considering how credible he tends to be, despite the absurdities of this story, it makes it hard to pass off as a lie so easily. While he was in space, he claims that he saw something that I don't wish upon anyone, a sort of space snake. He said that he saw an 8-foot-long white snake floating through space. I don't even know what I would do. Probably cry, call Houston, I'm not sure. There are many people who think that this was simply just a detached hose from the spaceship, but Dr. Musgrave remains adamant on what he saw, and to be completely honest, I kinda believe him. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. I mean, I don't know what happens in space, but I find it hard to believe that this person, who would likely be familiar with the parts of a spacecraft, mistook a hose for a snake. In our number 3 spot today we have the lights. Leroy Chiao is the commander of the ISS in 2005, and this is exactly when this strange sighting occurred. It is said that he wasn't the only one who witnessed this though, as it is said that the entire crew was there to see this unexplainable occurrence along with him. Basically, they saw a strange set of lights while up in space. He went on to describe the lights and said that they were in the formation of an upside down V, and that they ended up stumbling upon this bizarre situation after the formation flew past them. I'm just gonna say it, we're all thinking it. It sounds a lot like aliens. I just don't have any other possible explanations, and you're telling me that the whole crew saw it? I swear, nothing will convince me more of aliens than an astronaut's first-hand account. In our number 2 spot today we have glowing green. Gordon Cooper is a well-known astronaut after having flown the Mercury 9 and the Gemini 5, and in fact he was the last American to spend time in space alone. But despite all these exciting accolades, I want to take you to May 15th, 1963. Here he was sent off to space in a Mercury capsule for a 22-orbit journey around the Earth, and while on this journey he saw something very unsettling, a glowing green object that would approach his capsule. During his final orbit, he did tell the tracking station of this object that was quickly approaching his capsule, and they were able to pick up this UFO on their radar, but once Cooper landed, reporters were told that he was not allowed to answer questions regarding this UFO. It's even more interesting considering how Gordon has been a vocal and firm believer in UFOs, so I ask, what do you guys think it was? In our number 1 spot today we have space music. After 4 days of space travel in 1969, the Apollo 10 astronauts, Tom Stafford, Gene Cernan, and John Young, were on the far side of the moon. We were full of curiosity over what the other side could possibly be containing, but it wasn't necessarily the discovery people were expecting. While the astronauts were taking photographs and experiencing this new to humans area, they began to hear some otherworldly music coming from their headsets, and this continued for 1 full hour. Gene is said to have exclaimed, "Boy, that sure is weird music, we're gonna have to find out about that," while John replied, "Nobody will believe us." For decades this space music was left a complete mystery until just recently when an explanation was put forward. It is being claimed that perhaps this sound emanated from radio interference between spacecrafts. While this is a fairly reasonable explanation, not everyone is exactly convinced.
Number 10. Alien doorway. So obviously we know that no people have actually landed on Mars and had a look around, at least that we know of. So the majority of this list is from things seen on Mars rover photos, and some of them aren't actually scary and are more like just hilarious or conspiratorial, but give me a break, I've had a long day, okay. The first image on this list comes from May of this year from the Curiosity rover. The image appears to show an entrance hidden into the side of some Martian rocks. Many people started theorizing that this could have been some sort of door to a hidden alien building underground. The perfect shaping of the hole led many people to believe that it must be something man-made or even alien-made. The naysayers decided that it was caused by a rock breaking off due to an earthquake, but what kind of rock would break off and just leave like a perfect hole like that? So I'm gonna go with aliens. Number 9. The hole. Speaking of holes, in 2017 the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter took a picture that revealed a massive unexplained hole on the surface of the red planet. The orbiter has been going around the planet for the past 16 years and sends photos of the planet back for NASA to analyze, and this one definitely caught them off guard. Mars is covered in various different holes and indentations, but this massive pit really stood out against the rest of the planet's landscape. In real size, the hole is hundreds of meters in diameter and appears to have ice at the bottom of it. The surrounding ground apparently covered in patches of frozen carbon dioxide. NASA really had no explanation for how this hole occurred, and they put a team together to try and work out what might have caused it. But don't worry NASA, you don't need a team, because I am a self-titled extraterrestrial professional, and I say that it's a pool that aliens use for alien Olympic swimming competitions. Number 8. Morse code. This same orbiter sent back another interesting picture of the surface the year before in 2016. This time the surface seemed to be trying to send us a message. The marks on the ground appeared to form dashes and dots which formed into a Morse code message. The long markings in the soil were on the inside of an impact crater in an area known as the Hagel Dune Field. Many people started theorizing that this could potentially be a massive sign that aliens live on Mars and are trying to communicate by what could effectively be compared to a massive massive SOS sign on a beach. I don't know when I decided I was going to make this video all about aliens, but there's really no going back now. So what are they trying to say to us? What message could be so important that they had to carve it into the side of a planet? Okay, it doesn't make much sense to us. This is clearly communication in a Martian language that we just don't know yet. Number 7. Martian face. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 spacecraft was circling around Mars and taking photos of the surface in an attempt to find a good spot to land for its sister ship, the Viking 2. During its journey, they managed to photograph what appears to be a massive Martian face sticking out of the side of the planet, almost 2 miles long from end to end. It's in a region of the planet that is called Cydonia, and until now I didn't even know that the regions on Mars had names. Scientists released the photo to the public a few days later, claiming that it was just a rock formation, saying, "A huge rock formation which resembles a human head, formed by shadows giving the illusion of eyes, nose, and mouth." But that's just what they want you to think. My degree in alienology tells me that this is actually a Martian equivalent of the Maui statues, clearly a recreation of the aliens that reside on the planet. Number 6. Floating spoon. In 2015, the Mars Curiosity rover picked up another interesting and potentially alien thing amidst the rocks and dust. On August 30th, 2015, on the rover's 1089th day on Mars, it photographed what appears to be a massive floating spoon, a large handle shape extending from the rocks and ending in what appears to resemble a curved end of a spoon. NASA, of course, wants us to think that this spoon formation was caused by the wind breaking away at the rocks and leaving this shape behind. But I am here to tell you that this is actually the remnants of a Martian kitchen. Me and the other people on obscure internet forums are looking forward to the day that we find the fork and knife to complete the full set. And maybe the massive unexplained Mars hole is actually just a big plate. Number 5. Ghost. On this channel, we often look at blurry images that appear to show some kind of ghost or demon lurking in the background. But this one is a bit different than those because this one, of course, comes from Mars, so there's a bit more of a valid excuse for the image to not be of the best quality. This black and white image from the Mars rover appears to show another barren landscape of rocks and dust. Pretty typical for Mars, it honestly seems like kind of a boring place. But near the right corner of the image, you can see what appears to be the figure of a ghostly woman standing on top of one of the large rocks. To me, it looks like she's wearing a dress and, kind of standing with her arm like this or something, and she's got long dark hair. Others online said that the figure reminded them of a weeping angel creature from Doctor Who. No matter what you think, it's pretty creepy to look at and doesn't seem as easily explained away as any of the others. Number 4. Space crab. In 2015, the Mars rover sent back this image of a rocky cliff on the surface of Mars, and like the last, it seems pretty ordinary at a first glance. But when you zoom in to the right side of the image, you can see what appears to be some sort of orange, horrific alien crab spider monster, and it honestly makes my skin itch just looking at it. People online were going crazy and asking NASA to send some sort of mission out to try and figure out what this creature is, because you can tell there's nothing else that even resembles it in the surrounding area or in other photos we've seen of the planet. One scientist brushed it off, saying that they see images like this about once a week. And all I have to say, are there really that many spider space crabs on Mars they see them once a week? Like the last one, NASA doesn't seem to offer up any sort of quick explanation, instead just saying, "There's no crab, you're crazy." Well, NASA, you may be correct, but if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Number 3. Dust devils. Alright, let's take a quick break from the crazy and talk about something that has been scientifically explained, but is still just a horrifying concept that I hope I never have to personally experience. This image of a Mars landscape taken in 2016 reveals what appears to be a long vertical column. This is actually known as a Martian dust devil. These occur on Earth as well, but they're usually pretty short-lived and harmless. They're caused when the wind creates what is basically a small little tornado of dirt and sand, but the ones on Mars are a whole lot scarier. They're estimated to be able to grow to the size of about 10 times the size of an average Earth tornado and spin around at about 70 miles per hour, or 112 kilometers per hour for us Canadians. While the winds apparently wouldn't bother you that much, the sand hitting you in the face and tearing apart your spacesuit would be a pretty big issue. Oh, and also you'll probably be struck by a bunch of miniature lightning bolts too. Number 2, alien fungus. Alright, right back into the crazy. This image was taken by the Mars rover Opportunity in the year 2014, and just like most of the Mars photos we've seen, it's a bunch of rocks and dust. But wait, there's more. People noticed in the bottom left and middle of this image that there appears to be some sort of a more brightly colored object. It's dark red in the middle and white along the outside, which led people to start nicknaming it the Mars Jelly Donut. Theorists took to the internet to share their own opinions about what they believe the suddenly appearing formation to be. It is of course an alien fungus that somehow managed to grow on the surface of Mars. The truth of the situation that NASA shared is that it's apparently two pieces of a rock that the Mars rover drove over top of and managed to split in two, one of the pieces rolling down the hill to where it rests in the bottom left of the image. Number 1, Barack Obama. Ex-United States President Barack Obama is a Martian and actually lives on Mars? Of course. This panoramic image was taken from the summit of a place on Mars called Husband Hill and was snapped back in 2005 by NASA's Spirit rover. The picture was taken over the course of 3 days to provide, quote, a level of clarity that is unequaled in the history of Mars exploration. This high level of clarity allowed us to see the truth of what's hiding on Mars. People pointed out the fact that there was a rock that seemed to be in the exact shape of Barack Obama's head. At first glance, I really didn't see it, but once you look at it for longer, it really becomes uncanny. Obama has previously said in interviews that he would really like to see humans fly out and live on Mars, so here's my theory. He traveled back in time, taking a space rocket with him, went to Mars, became king of Mars where they built a statue of him, and years later NASA took a picture of the eroded statue in 2005, which I believe is definitely the easiest explanation.
Number 10, moon landing plans. We are trying to go to the moon again, but that might not happen for a while. Revised schedules in a leaked document showed that the agency is preparing for more inevitable delays, distinguishing between baseline dates and the schedule as it stands, a canned schedule that would prioritize regular launches, and a content program that would only launch when each component of each mission is ready. Under the content schedule, the Artemis 3 mission wouldn't launch until 2026, with a rover making its way to the lunar surface not before 2032, as opposed to the currently projected 2030. But there's one problem with launching the Gateway. The rocket configuration of the agency's Space Launch System, SLS, called Block 1B is far from ready. In fact, just the tower it's building for the launch of this SLS iteration is already way over budget and behind schedule, just like the entire SLS program. Then there's SpaceX's Starship, also under contract with NASA to send astronauts to the lunar surface, which appears larger and more capable than the Gateway. Now NASA is clearly still trying to establish the schedule of returning the first NASA astronauts to the moon since the early 1970s, and the dates are slipping fast. Number 9. Leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage, obtained by a documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News, appeared to show the mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Amza Combat Information Center, according to the filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appears to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San Diego before it vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. The Defense Department confirmed the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said it would be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, a panel established to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects. Number 8. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed unidentified aerial phenomenon UAP with his own eyes, called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious object spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects objects in our airspace. And these were not just mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These were no mere balloons, they could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means of lift or control surfaces, in other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have a clear understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with, and if we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear if there are things over our head that we're not sure what they are, well, we need to figure it out. If they're adversarial, it's a national security issue, we have the mechanisms for that. If it's not a security issue and it's not an adversarial platform, then it's a matter of scientific inquiry. Now, it's crazy that he was even allowed to speak on this, and to be honest, it kinda makes me scared. Number 7. ADAR. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of new reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of those events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the ADAR office has received 366 reports of unidentified aerial phenomena. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred before March 2021, but hadn't been included in an earlier report. The new numbers indicate a step in a rise of UAP sightings. The report released in June 2021 listed just 144 reports, covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to US government efforts to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize the potential risk the phenomenon poses, both as an aviation hazard and potential adversarial activity such as foreign surveillance efforts. Number 6. Secret Space Station. Back when the NASA space program was all over the news in the 60s, the USAF was simultaneously working on a more covert program. The Manned Orbiting Laboratory was a top-secret United States Air Force initiative, with the main objective being to serve as a manned satellite to spy against the Soviet Union. The shuttle never officially launched and the program was shut down in 1969. However, thanks to declassified documents, we can see how the government intended to keep a watchful eye over the Soviet Union. Number 5. Trump's tweet. Okay, this is kind of funny, but let me explain. There are thousands of satellites in Earth's orbit right now, and hundreds are operated by the United States military. While the public has known of their presence for years, the actual capabilities of our spy satellites were unknown until former President Donald Trump tweeted a classified image in September 2019. From the image of the exploded rocket launched in Iran, experts were quick to identify the satellite as one of the United States' KH-11 reconnaissance satellites, which for obvious reasons, there is not a lot of known information about it. Now, this man literally posted a classified image on his Twitter, and people still think he didn't hide documents in his bathroom. Yeah, okay. Number 4. Space threats. A document leak from a Discord chat room by Jack Texiera, a member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, spoke about space threats. The leak comes as the US Space Force enters its 3rd year of operation, and as senior Pentagon leaders sound the alarm over increased threats coming from space. Space Force General Chance Saltzman, the chief of space operations, said the Pentagon is assessing an incredibly sophisticated array of threats that include jamming of communications and GPS satellites, spacecrafts that can grapple other satellites, lasers that can dazzle them, cyber attacks, and even nesting dolls or satellites that release others that spread out and track adversaries' spacecraft. The leaked document showed Russia has also experimented with its Tobel electronic warfare system in an attempt to disrupt SpaceX Starlink satellite system. In its annual space threat assessment report, the Center for Strategic and International Studies found that China continues to make progress towards the goal of becoming the world leader in space. Over the past year, China has continued to grow its space and counter-space assets, maintaining its status as the second most capable space nation after the United States. China has also developed a space station in low Earth orbit, landed a spacecraft on the far side of the moon, and a rover on Mars. It also plans to put astronauts on the moon and is targeting the lunar South Pole, where NASA's Artemis program also intends to send astronauts. China by far has the most dynamic space program of the two US rivals, US officials say. One of the leaked documents say China's overall military strategy to establish and maintain information dominance in conflict drives Beijing's development of space and counter-space doctrine, capabilities, and TTP or tactics, techniques, and procedures. Number 3. Navy pilots talk about UFO. Recently, 2 former Navy pilots were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Frander and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during a training exercise but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. In an interview with NBC News, Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this little white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping-pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then when the pilot got within a half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. Again, I'm shocked that they were even allowed to speak about this at all. Number 2. Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the code name for the systematic study of unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to its termination on December 17, 1969. The project, headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, was initially directed by Captain Edward J. Ruppelt. Project Blue Book had 2 goals: to determine if UFOs were a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. Thousands of UFO reports were collected, analyzed, and filed. As a result of the Condon Report, which concluded the study of UFOs was unlikely to yield major scientific discoveries, and a review of the report by the National Academy of Sciences, Project Blue Book was terminated in 1969. The Air Force supplies the following summary of its investigations. No UFO reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force was ever an indication of a threat to our national security. There was no evidence submitted or discovered by the Air Force that sightings categorized as unidentified represented technological developments or principles beyond the range of modern scientific knowledge, and there was no evidence indicating that the sightings categorized as unidentified were extraterrestrial vehicles. By the time Project Blue Book ended, it had collected 12,618 UFO reports and concluded that most of them were misidentifications of natural phenomena, clouds, stars, etc., or conventional aircraft, which is kinda lame. And coming in at number 1 is Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Among some of the Pentagon's most secretive programs is the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The program was dedicated to investigate reports of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, but for years it was never formally acknowledged by the Department of Defense. The program was first made public on December 16, 2017. The program began in 2007 with funding of $22 million over 5 years until it ended in 2012. The program began in the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, and according to the Department of Defense, the AATIP ended in 2012 after 5 years. However, reporting suggests that the U.S. government programs to investigate UFOs continued. The agency claims they stopped receiving funds in 2012, however, many believe it continues to operate to this day. Number 10. Low gravity doesn't affect your bones and muscles. We know that humans do just fine in Earth's gravity. On the other hand, we know that human bones and muscles can atrophy terribly in zero gravity, as seen in experiments on the International Space Station. Astronauts on the ISS have to exercise for 2 hours a day to prevent muscle loss, but their bones still lose calcium over time, and they don't recover until they come back to Earth. Adding to this, we don't know how the human body will react on Mars, where gravity is only about 0.38 the strength of Earth. Many people have long assumed that humans can survive just fine in Martian gravity. It'll be just like Earth, only we can jump a little higher, but we don't don't actually know this for a fact. It might turn out that low Martian gravity is just as bad for human health as zero gravity. Mars's low gravity may also erode other capabilities that are crucial for everyday functioning. For instance, NASA has found that eyesight can mysteriously deteriorate in zero gravity. Astronaut John Phillips went from a perfect 20/20 to 2100 after just 6 months aboard the ISS. Astronauts also find it harder to sleep in zero gravity, and many passengers in space suffer from insomnia. Number 9. Space Shuttle Challenger astronauts died instantly. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds into its flight and ended the lives of all 7 crew members instantly. The spacecraft disintegrated 46,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Cape Canaveral, Florida at 11:39 a.m. It was the first fatal accident involving an American spacecraft in flight. It was thought that all the astronauts passed away instantly, but it was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, they were awake and aware as they plummeted towards the Atlantic Ocean, which is terrifying. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was, so they kept this a secret. I'm gonna be honest, I do understand the reasoning for this, but it's just sad. Number 8. The sun is a big ball of fire. Okay, so this isn't all NASA's fault, but despite what you've been led to believe, the sun is not a ball of fire. There isn't any fire in the sun. Fire requires oxygen, and the sun is composed mostly of helium and hydrogen. In fact, the heat from the sun comes from something called nuclear fusion. The pressure and temperature in the sun's core causes the hydrogen atoms to fuse together into helium atoms. This process gives off the intense heat and light of the sun. People, including scientists, sometimes say that the sun burns hydrogen to make it glow, but that is just a figure of speech. Hydrogen really doesn't burn, it fuses into helium. Also, the sun itself is white, which means it contains all the colors in the visible spectrum. The sun appears orangish yellow because of the blue light it emits has a shorter wavelength and is scattered in the atmosphere, which is the same process that makes the sky appear blue. Number 7. Mars is the only other habitable planet. It's been said that Mars is the only other habitable planet, but that's not true. Kepler 186f is the first rocky exoplanet to be found within the habitable zone, as the region around the host star has the temperature that is right for liquid water. This planet is also very close in size to Earth. While planets have previously been found in the habitable zone, they are at least 40% larger in size than Earth, and understanding their makeup is challenging. Kepler 186f is more reminiscent of Earth. Although the size of Kepler 186f is known, its mass and composition are not. Previous research, however, suggests that a planet the size of Kepler 186f is likely to be rocky. Even though we may not find out about what's going on at the surface of this planet anytime soon, it's a strong reminder of why new technologies are being developed that will enable scientists to get a closer look at distant worlds, but we still have a lot to learn. So maybe one day the human race will be living on Kepler 186f. Number 6. Your rocket won't blow up before leaving Earth. Yeah, your rocket can actually explode before you even leave Earth. For example, Elon Musk's plan to go to Mars involves strapping a giant spaceship atop the biggest rocket that humanity has ever built. Because any rocket launch basically involves a long, controlled explosion, no matter how many safety tests are done beforehand, there is always a risk. If anything goes wrong, if the explosion gets out of control, the people strapped in that big container of fuel don't stand a chance. For context, NASA's Space Shuttle program carried 833 passengers between 1981 and 2011. Of those, 14 people died in explosions and 2 high-profile accidents, a fatality rate of 1.6%. That's more dangerous than driving, and it's even a bit riskier than climbing Mount Everest. Some of SpaceX's smaller Falcon 9 rockets have either exploded on the launch pad or blown up mid-flight as well, so safe to say getting to space is just as dangerous as being there. Number 5. Extended space travel doesn't affect DNA. It's not true. Astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent a year at the International Space Station in 2016, returned to find out that he was 2 inches taller than his departing height. The new physical differences between Scott and his identical twin brother, Mike, also an astronaut, were startling. Scientists compared the DNA of the two and found that besides growing 2 inches, Scott's gut bacteria were completely different and his gene expression had changed. Scientists concluded that the changes were caused by the stresses of space travel, which can cause changes in a cell's biological pathways. Although Scott eventually returned to his original height, his other genetic changes are seemingly irreversible, meaning Scott and his brother are no longer identical twins, which is insane. Number 4. You can only see the Great Wall of China from space. It's been said that the only man-made structure you can see from space is the Great Wall of China, but the visible wall theory was shaken after China's own astronaut, Yang Lui, said he couldn't see the historic structure. There was even talk about rewriting textbooks that supported the theory, a formidable task in Earth's most populous nation. The issue surfaced again after photos taken by Li Ruiqiao from the International Space Station were determined to show small sections of the wall in Inner Mongolia about 200 miles north of Beijing. A photo was taken of it, but it wasn't the only thing seen. For years it's been said that the Great Wall of China is the only structure to be seen from space, but that isn't true. From the ISS about 250 miles up, you can see the Great Wall along with numerous other man-made structures, but it's definitely not the most visible imprint of man on our planet. Number 3. Space isn't dangerous. We all know that accidents happen and things can go wrong, but it seems like NASA never told their astronauts how bad things could get. Astronaut Scott Perinsky had to install a new module on the ISS that would serve as a node for the addition of future research laboratories. Part of the mission required changing the location of an array of solar panels. Things were going along really well until the crew inside commanded these large solar panels to extend. They got jammed up and the panels began to tear. It was unsafe to continue to extend this panel any further, and you couldn't retract it either. There was concern that if the astronauts even tried to undock the space shuttle, it might rip apart and hit the shuttle. After 72 hours of grueling work on the ground, NASA came up with a plan. Scott would have to travel further away from safety of an airlock than had ever been previously attempted. It wasn't only the distance that was nerve-wracking, as Scott explained, there was a real danger that we could do even worse damage to the space station. Then there was the potential risk to myself, because if there was any metal-to-metal connection with the solar panel or arcing, it could actually electrocute me or cause ignition in the 100% oxygen in my suit. All the tools I was working with had to be specially insulated. The metal parts of my spacesuit had to be wrapped in special tape, he said. Thankfully, everything worked out and the mission was a success. Scott has said, "I still to this day think it's one of NASA's greatest accomplishments, but it's crazy that he had to go through that." Number 2. There's no life on the moon. When astronaut Neil Armstrong took a walk on the moon and became the first man to do so in 1969, many conspiracy theories came to light. For one, people claimed he didn't actually go to the moon and that the footage was recorded in a studio. Of the many conspiracy theories surrounding this moment, there's one that remains a mystery to date. During the Apollo 11 mission, after Neil landed on the moon, NASA claims to have lost transmission for roughly 2 minutes. And in a reportedly secret message to NASA, Neil said, "These babies were huge, sir. Enormous. Oh god, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecrafts out here lined up on the far side of the crater's edge. They're on the moon watching us." Yep. Seems like Neil encountered some aliens, and I'm sure they never prepared him for that. And coming in at number 1 is the effect space has on you emotionally. Being in space is scary. Your safety is at risk both physically and emotionally. Astronaut Chris Hadfield said sometimes we hear pings as tiny rocks hit our spaceship, and also the creaks and snaps of expanding metal as we go in and out of sunlight. The solar panels are full with tiny holes from the micrometeorites. I watched a large meteorite burn up between me and Australia, and to think that the hypersonic dumb lump of rock randomly hurtling into us instead sent a shiver up my back. Besides that, going to space can cause a lot of psychological issues like anxiety or depression. When actor William Shatner went up to space, he said this of his experience. Everything I had thought was wrong. Everything I had expected to see was wrong. I had thought that going into space would be the ultimate catharsis of that connection I had been looking for between all living things, that being up there would be the next beautiful step to understanding the harmony of the universe. I discovered that the beauty isn't out there, it's down here with all of us. Leaving that behind made my connection to our tiny planet even more profound. It was among the strongest feelings of grief I have ever encountered. The contrast between the vicious coldness of space and the warm nurturing of Earth below me filled with overwhelming sadness. I learned later that I was not alone in this feeling. It is called the overview effect and is not uncommon among astronauts, including Yuri Gagarin, Michael Collins, Sally Ride, and many others. Essentially, when someone travels to space and views Earth from orbit, a sense of the planet's fragility takes hold. I cannot imagine the feelings of experiencing this, and it honestly sounds traumatizing. Ugh.